our politicians incapable of saying to the British people what the Canadian politicians said to their people?
I think we got used to Tony Blair. We've had a low, dishonest 15 years. The new Labour government, and I apologise to Diane, but she's not really part of it, was never a government. It was a machinery for winning elections, and it won them by lying. It won them by telling people there are no hard choices. You will never have to choose. You can have booming public expenditure and a brilliantly run private sector. Everything is yours. It's what I call the L'Oreal election, because you deserve it. It's Marks and Spencer's, excellence for everybody, and it is rubbish. And we've got you, but we like it. You know, it's lovely not having to choose. And then, you know, there'll become that day when that magic wand fades and the stardust goes and the horrible, horrible reality comes.
And you're saying, if you're right, that this is what's happened, that this has contaminated the other parties as well?
I think completely. In fact, I think Cameron is more self-consciously an heir of Blair, much more, actually, than Gordon Brown. And I think the people round him, you know, there are people like Michael Gove who worshipped at the shrine of Blair, complete neocon reverence for what he did, the gurus, the great gurus of the Tory party. The problem is the Tories were mesmerised by what Blair did. This is why we have no choice. This is why I think, although, Michael, you were right, of course there is a big choice. The way the two parties are behaving is they're both quarrelling for what is actually a false legacy, the legacy of Blair.
Is David right?
Yes, David's absolutely right. And I would...
Hold on, he's on your side, don't push it.
I know.
I would add to that there's a feeling in the United Kingdom, which is shared by all the parties, that we're going to get away with this economic position. Now, it's quite interesting. In countries that don't think they're going to get away with it, Canada is a very good example of 15 years ago. Spain is an example right now.
Ireland.
Ireland. I mean, Spain this morning, the Spanish Prime Minister in the Financial Times has given a blood-curdling interview in which he's talking about all the cuts he's going to make, how far he's going to go, because he believes that Spain could go tumbling down. And so for him, what he has to do is convince people that he's going to be really tough.
Socialist government in Spain.
Yes. Now, we think that we're going to get away with it, so nobody feels obliged
Diane,
to do the tough
you're
talk.
shaking your head.
I think both of you are underestimating the great British public. I think the British public knows, you couldn't avoid it, that billions were spent to bail out the banks. The British public understands that money has to come from somewhere and it's going to come out of their pockets. The British public is calculating which cuts regime would they better survive. The British public is under no illusions that there are going to be cuts after the next election, whoever wins.
I think you're wrong. It seems
Well,
there are opinion polls which actually show that whenever a party says there will be a cut, they go down in the polls. There's perfectly clear evidence.
Because we had George Osborne's Age of Austerity at the Tory
exactly,
party.
and then a dip.
And the Tories went down.
We had Alistair. We had Alistair Darling. Being honest, we went down in a dip. I think one of the reasons that the Lib Dems are actually doing rather less well than you might have thought is that they've been particularly honest. In fact, the leader, Clegg, actually cited the Canadian example, and whereupon they started to flatline.
Can I say the reason, when you start gloating about swinging cuts...
It's not gloating.
Well, no, the reason... The public panics when you say that, because their calculation is that your cut's going to be bigger than the other person's, but they understand there's got to be cuts.
Supposing, Michael, the Tories were to take a much tougher line of the kind of a Canadian line, let's use it as a shorthand, are they capable of selling it to the British people?
No.
No, I agree.
Well, they're not capable of selling it, and the British public certainly isn't capable of buying it. I mean, the British...
You don't agree with Diane that the public are ready for this? That the public may be part of the problem, as David suggested?
I think the public are an enormous part of the problem. I think the public do know that there's more to this than meets the eye, but for many members of the public, the recession has not been very bad so far. I mean, last year, if you kept your job, your pay almost certainly went up more than inflation, your mortgage interest payments came down, you ended 2009 better off than you started it. And so when you tell people, look, there's this immense public crisis that we've got to deal with, people say, well, I'm entirely unaware of it. Can I just add one other thing? The way that this is always discussed, there is no idea of economic dynamism. So people say, look, if you're going to reduce taxes by this much, then you're going to have to reduce spending by this much. There's no understanding at all that if you actually got the economy moving again, for instance, lower taxes might make people do more work, which might produce more income. But there's no understanding in the media of that
But
at
you see,
all.
Just to say, I have visited, unlike either of you, 20 primary schools in my area since January and 4 secondary schools. Every single teacher I spoke to knows that big public sector cuts are coming down the pike. Everyone.
But so the really interesting point is the one that Michael's made. What happened in Canada is exactly what he said. The idea at the moment is if you cut in the public sector, the whole economy goes expletive deleted up. It doesn't. What happened in Canada within 4 years was that Canada was registering the highest rates of growth in the G7. Last year, Canada grew 5%. You know, it's got the lowest actual debt levels in the G7. It's got the lowest current account deficit in the G7. It is effectively a booming country. And until we get back to that and get away from this business of, you know, I don't frankly care what school teachers think in Hackney.
We try not to mention constituencies in the middle of an election campaign. There's a sense in this election campaign